What I want you to explain is the logic behind what you're doing.
Is it time?
It is time for us to do what we have been doing, and that time is every day.
We'll know in a very short period of time, but it looks like it could be something that will be not good. Believe me, not good.
I see issue with that. And again, hey.
You're not going to be able to insult your way to the presidency. That's not going to happen.
I don't know who created Pokemon Go, but I'm trying to figure out how we get them to have Pokemon go to the polls.
I'm Ted Cruz, and my pronoun is kiss my ass.
So when you think about it, there is great significance to the passage of time in terms of what we need to do to lay these wires, what we need to do to create these jobs.
America is a nation that can be defined in a single word. I was going to put him.
Not good. Believe me, not good.
What's up, everyone? A pleasant good afternoon, dissidents one and all. Welcome to a special matinee edition of the Do Dissidents podcast. Keaton Weiss here with Russell Dobular.
Feliz Navidad!
Feliz Navidad. We have a special show today, 2:30 p.m. start time. We have a prior commitment this evening, and so we are on today as a Wednesday matinee, just like Broadway. You know, the Wednesday matinees create the most traffic in Times Square, but we are here alone in our homes for a special afternoon show, and then we will be back at our regularly scheduled time on Friday morning, 9 a.m., but good to see you all here. It's kind of nice doing an afternoon show. It's nice to work in during the day sometimes.
A little less vampiric.
Yeah, you're just less tired. You know, sometimes by 8 o'clock, I'm like, oh, man. Now I gotta do this. Oh.
It's true. Also, I don't know if it's the effect of the planets on the brain, but you can understand why there's this idea that midnight is the witching hour in a time of supernatural phenomena, because things do get a little weird and surreal that time of the evening. You know,
yeah,
get a little strange.
Yeah, I mean, now when we start at 8, we go till about 11, so we are on.
There's a weird vibe.
Weird vibe, but a good vibe. We love our regularly scheduled programs, and we're sorry for anybody who can't be with us today because of the early start time, although it's a good way to give back to our overseas followers because we have a lot of Euro dissidents, a lot of dissidents from across the pond, and they have a great lineup of shows this week because they got the Halloween special yesterday, plus they have, obviously, the matinee today, and then Friday they will catch a matinee as well. So spreading the love around here a little bit, but we have a lot to cover, obviously. Thank you for those who tuned into our Halloween show yesterday. That was a nice little respite from the news, but obviously probably the worst
news.
News.
Nice.
It was nice, but the news was waiting for us when we got offline because obviously, arguably, the most horrific development of this whole sordid affair took place yesterday, and we found out about it as soon as we signed off, as soon as I signed off.
Putting together the show since October 7th has been a matter of choosing between horrific headlines.
Yes.
Which horrific headline can we hold until the next show? Exactly.
That's absolutely true. And so we're going to get started, folks. We have a super chat already, Rumble Rants we are able to field. We don't have Jake today because it's a matinee, but I have my Rumble window open. So if anybody would like to contribute over on Rumble and have your chat read on the screen, we can do that for you. Thank you guys very much for those contributions. Why don't we get started here? We're going to go back in time, folks, to a simpler world on October 6th when World War III was only brewing on one burner, the Ukraine-Russia burner. China, if you count China, but that's kind of been a slow simmer for years, right? It was really, I mean, the burner was at a 10 for Russia-Ukraine. And here, Time Magazine put out this report on Volodymyr Zelensky. The headline, "Nobody believes in our victory like I do." Inside Volodymyr Zelensky's struggle to keep Ukraine in the fight. This was a long piece. We are not going to read anywhere near the whole thing, but we will read enough to give you an idea. Volodymyr Zelensky was running late. The invitation to his speech at the National Archives in Washington had gone out to several hundred guests, including congressional leaders and top officials from the Biden administration. Billed as the main event of his visit in late September, it would give him a chance to inspire U.S. support against Russia with the kind of oratory the world has come to expect from Ukraine's wartime president. It did not go as planned. That afternoon, Zelensky's meetings at the White House and the Pentagon delayed him by more than an hour. And when he finally arrived to begin his speech at 6:41 p.m., he looked distant and agitated. Yeah, the meeting did not go well. Here's some leaked audio from that meeting.
What I want you to explain is the logic behind what you're doing.
Not good. That's
well,
Joe Biden.
we also have audio from his departure.
Go home and get your fucking shine box.
Yeah, no, so not good. Not a good meeting. Not a good meeting. We only have those two snippets that we can play for you. Those are only what we can confirm. Everything else we're gonna have to
have a
rely
mole
on Time Magazine. Yeah, exactly. An incompetent mole who only got those couple of snippets there. He relied on his wife, First Lady Olena Zelenska, to carry his message of resilience on the stage behind him, while his own delivery felt stilted, as though he wanted to get it over with. At one point, while handing out medals after the speech, he urged the organizer to hurry things along. The reason, he later said, was the exhaustion he felt that night, not only from the demands of leadership during the war, but also the persistent need to convince his allies that with their help, Ukraine can win. Nobody believes in our victory like I do. Nobody, Zelensky told Time in an interview after his trip. Instilling that belief in his allies, he said, takes all your power, your energy. You understand? It takes so much of everything. Oh, if only he knew. If only he knew. No one ever believed in your ability to win. It is only getting harder. 20 months into the war, about a fifth of Ukraine's territory remains under Russian occupation. Tens of thousands of soldiers and civilians have been killed, and Zelensky can feel during his travels that global interest in the war has slackened. So has the level of international support. The scariest thing is that part of the world got used to the war in Ukraine, he says. Exhaustion with the war rolls along like a wave. You see it in the United States, in Europe, and we see that as soon as they start to get a little tired, it becomes like a show to them. I can't watch this rerun for the 10th time. Public support for aid to Ukraine has been in decline for months in the U.S., and Zelensky's visit did nothing to revive it. Now it's down to 41% from 48% a couple months back. So some 41% of Americans want Congress to provide more weapons to Kyiv, down from 65% in June. When Ukraine began a major counteroffensive, according to Reuters' survey taken shortly after Zelensky's departure. That offensive has proceeded at an excruciating pace and with enormous losses, making it ever more difficult for Zelensky to convince partners that victory is around the corner. With the outbreak of war in Israel, even keeping the world's attention on Ukraine has become a major challenge. After his visit to Washington, Time followed the president and his team back to Kyiv, hoping to understand how they would react to the signals they had received, especially the insistent calls for Zelensky to fight corruption inside his own government and the fading enthusiasm for a war with no end in sight. On my first day in Kyiv, I asked one member of his circle how the president was feeling. The response came without a second's hesitation: angry. Last slide. The usual sparkle of his optimism, his sense of humor, his tendency to liven up a meeting in the war room with a bit of banter or a bawdy joke, none of that has survived into the second year of all-out war. Now he walks in, gets the updates, gives the orders, and walks out, says one longtime member of his team. Another tells me that most of all, Zelensky feels betrayed by his Western allies. Oh, that's nice. We've only given him, $120 billion? Yeah. They have left him without the means to win the war. Wow. Only the means to survive it.
That's how fast it takes for a guy to get whacked.
Yeah, exactly.
They found a new toy.
They found a new toy, right. They got a new war in Israel that they think they can actually win. As horrific as that is.
And also, I can't remember the exact quote, but they talked about the corruption there, and their source said we're stealing hand over fist or something. I can't remember the exact phrase. I got to say, if you're somebody who gets your information from alternative media, this is one of those moments where it just gets so frustrating that the shit we said 2 years ago is now everyone can say it, right?
Right.
It's just again and again and again and again. We're out ahead of this stuff by a year, 2 years. And then finally, all of the outlets that fought us, that called us Putin puppets, all of a sudden, for whatever reason, there's some shift in the situation and it becomes acceptable for them to tell the truth. And all of a sudden, everything that we got called, Russian puppets for is all in that article. Everything that the alternative media, that Gray Zone, that Cy Hirsch, that all these people have been saying for 2 years, all of a sudden now it's in time.
Yeah, no, that was my exact take on this as well. My exact response is that now, 1 year, 10 months, and a few 100,000 corpses later, it is okay to tell the obvious truth, which was obvious from minute one, whether you knew anything about Russia and Ukraine or Eastern European geopolitics, which is that, of course, the war is unwinnable for Ukraine. All it takes is a look at a map to know that the war is unwinnable for Ukraine. You don't have to know anything except size. There is no way Ukraine is going to win this war. That was obvious from minute one. You didn't need to know a lot. It took a modicum of common sense and a modicum of independent thought. That's all it took. And so few people, especially so few Democrats, who were the ones who fell for this for the most part, although Republican voters at the beginning of this were on board also, so few of these people had it in them to just think for themselves and tell themselves the obvious truth, which is that, of course, this was an unwinnable war from the beginning. And it just goes to show you, you don't have to know all that much to know that when a war breaks out, always trust the anti-war people, because the anti-war people are always proven right in the end. All you do in the interim is waste a lot of time, which wastes a lot of treasure and, most importantly, a lot of blood. This war was avoidable before it started. It was endable after it began. And you weren't allowed to talk like that. You weren't allowed to talk like that. The wave of censorship that occurred right after the war started, just like the wave of censorship that's occurring now that the Israel war has taken off, these things follow a similar life cycle, which is at the beginning, the establishment rushes to push a narrative, and now the narrative around the Israel war is crumbling even faster than the narrative around the Ukraine war. Right. The narrative around the Ukraine war crumbled faster than the narrative about the Libya war, faster that about the Iraq war, right? Luckily, the advent of the internet, for all of the damage it has caused to the social fabric, it has given ordinary people the means to communicate common sense truth. And the more that common sense truth gets out, the more people with common sense, which is most people, cannot help but see what is obvious to them. You can't hide such basic truths from everybody for all time. Eventually, the truth is going to come out. And now, like I said, almost 2 years into this horrific war. I mean, we're talking about all the carnage now in Gaza, as we should be, obviously. Bakhmut, 75,000 Ukrainians lost their lives in Bakhmut and about 30,000 Russians. So just in that one city alone, over 100,000 dead. The human toll of this has been extraordinary and entirely avoidable if only people had listened to these voices that were marginalized from day one. And it takes almost 2 years for that common sense, just common sense, to find its way to Time magazine. 2 goddamn years.
Well, here's a couple of numbers I pulled up that told you everything that you needed to know. The population of Russia is 143.4 million. The population of Ukraine is 43.79 million. So what's going to happen in a war of attrition between those two countries? You don't have to be a genius. And that's setting aside relative industrial capacity between Russia and Ukraine. Just bodies to throw into the war. And that's one of the things this article got into also, that they don't have enough people. That the age of the soldiers now, the average age is in the low 40s.
Yep.
Because they wiped out all the young people. What did you think was going to happen if you assumed that Russia would not just give up, which anybody who knows anything about Russian history would have assumed, and anyone understanding what was at stake for Putin in this situation would have assumed? Well, then a war of attrition obviously can only end one way, with the defeat of the Ukrainians.
Of course. And what did they think it was going to be? What did they think Russia was going to surrender in 6 months? Like, did you not anticipate this was going to go on forever? Of course. That's how Russia's always fought throughout their history. And so, it just shows how brainwashed he was, I think, from the outset.
Yeah. When I look back now on the fucking idiots, man, you know what stands out to me? A tour guide who put a Ukrainian flag right when this broke out, and I don't know, he had a death wish, man. He knew me well. He knew me better than to come up to me and say, "What do you think of my flag?" That guy's still in therapy from the response that he got from me, and having been through a few propaganda a-go-go's in my lifetime now, it is just amazing to me that the same people fall for the same shit over and over and over again. These were the same people who cheered on the Iraq War. These are the same people who believed that Hillary was going to bring the Senate. It's like, it doesn't matter how many times the narrative is false. And this is a good example of it. It's very Orwellian, the way you're supposed to believe something one day, and then the next day it goes down the memory hole and you're not allowed to think that anymore. That's what this is, and that's how it works. They're told what to think, they're programmed, and then when that is no longer tenable, they'll write articles as if they never said what they said yesterday, and they swallow it. And that prepares them to swallow the next narrative.
Absolutely, 100%. No doubt about that. Vlad the Dragon, thanks for the $5. Just a little grist for the mill, boys. Keep up the good work. Thank you, Vlad the Dragon. Appreciate that very much. Tusker, I want to recommend the documentary Roadmap to Apartheid to you and your audience. Thank you, Tusker, and thanks for the donation. And thanks for entertaining me while I'm working. You're welcome. Just keep your eye on that X-ray machine.
Yeah, don't zap nobody in the nuts.
Right, exactly. Let's take a Rumble rant from our friend Dave Delara. Yes, we know this. They bombed Jabalia refugee camp again today.
Again?
Yep, this morning. They hit it again. Yep. You may have thought they weren't that depraved. No chance. Yeah, no, they bombed it again this morning after all that yesterday.
Wow.
After all that. Yeah, we will get to that. Eric Rousseau, what's the best place to watch the end of the world? Right here. You're here. No better place to do it than right here on the Do Dissidents YouTube channel or Rumble channel.
It starts with birds and snakes and airplanes. Yeah. Lenny Bruce is not afraid. We got to get that on the soundboard.
Yeah, that would be, you talk about a music video. That would be a tough one. I'm surprised you didn't know the answer to that, Eric. I mean, thank you for the donation, but that's an easy one. Best place to watch the end. That's the whole point of the show. We wanted to give people a way to watch the end of the world. That's the whole premise of the program.
We were gonna call this the podcast at the end of the universe, but we decided to go with Do Dissidents.
Yeah, right. Exactly. All right, folks. This is a segment that we've been eyeballing for a little while. Just like the UAW strike was a slow drip on the way in, it was a slow drip on the way out, because first Ford and the UAW came to a deal, then Stellantis, and now finally General Motors reaches tentative deal with the United Auto Workers Union, ending strikes at the Detroit automakers after 6 weeks on the picket line. The United Auto Workers and General Motors have agreed to a deal that will put an end to bargaining between the union and Detroit automakers following more than 6 weeks of targeted U.S. labor strikes, the sides confirmed hours after sources told CNBC about the deal. GM is the final Detroit automaker to reach a deal with the union following historically contentious talks. Roughly a third of the union's 146,000 workers with GM, Ford Motor, and Stellantis went on strike after the sides failed to reach agreements by a September 14th deadline. So at no point was even close to half of the workforce actually on strike, and they were able to make this happen. The UAW said the tentative agreement, which still must be ratified by members, adds battery workers from GM's Ultium Cells joint venture and a division known as Subsystems into the union's master agreement with the company. That was one of the concerns. The transition to electronic vehicles meant they were going to want to unionize some non-union shops, which it seems that they have succeeded in doing. Later in the article, the pact also includes 25% pay increases over the terms of the agreement. The raises and benefits such as cost of living adjustments, they call that COLA in shorthand, cumulatively raised the top wage to more than $42 an hour, including an increase of 70% for starting wages to over $30 an hour, the union said. That increase would be at least 2 percentage points higher than the Ford and Stellantis deals. A UAW spokesman did not immediately respond for the difference in starting pay. However, it may be based off of COLA estimates. Those deals also reinstated cost of living adjustments, reduced an 8-year path to the top wages to 3 years, so that's good, and allowed the right to strike over plant closures, among other significantly enhanced benefits. I'll stop for a second because the right to strike over future plant closures is hugely important, because despite this deal, the bigwigs at these automakers are still saying that the transition to electronic vehicles has the potential to put 40% of the workforce out of work, because they're saying that EVs are 40% less labor intensive than the cars that they make now. And so the fact that they have reserved the right within this contract to strike against any future plant closures is huge. Even if they can't save all of the jobs, they will be able to renegotiate terms, maybe retirement packages, severance packages for people who are ultimately laid off, right? So that's a big win there. One last card here. The strikes have collectively cost GM, Ford, and Stellantis billions of dollars in lost production. Ford said Thursday that the union strike, forgot to hit the music. Oh, where's my violin? Oh, where is it?
I'll find it. You do your thing.
I screwed up. Yeah, find my violin. There it is. The strikes have collectively cost GM, Ford, and Stellantis billions of dollars in lost production. Ford said Thursday that the union strike has cost it $1.3 billion, and the deal, if ratified by members, would increase labor costs by roughly $850 to $900 per vehicle produced. GM said Tuesday the strike had costed about $800 million. The proposed agreements are record-setting for the union, which was far more confrontational and strategic during the talks than in recent history. It's not immediately clear how much the labor deals will increase labor costs for the companies, which had argued that giving in to all of the union's demands would affect their competitiveness and even long-term viability. Deutsche Bank recently estimated the overall cost increase of the agreement at Ford to be $6.2 billion over the term, $7.2 billion at GM, $6.4 billion at Stellantis. So this is all but certain to be ratified. Sean Fain seems very happy with how everything turned out. I obviously had my skepticism at the start of this because of that very abrupt shift in strategy from an all-out strike where everybody walked off the job all at once to this sort of stand-up rolling strike that they ended up implementing at the last minute, much to the chagrin, it seemed, of many of the rank and file. But it seems like in 6 weeks, they are happy with the deal that they got. And just to clarify, because I know I got some shit for this, and I brought Shama Sawant on, and she took some shit for what she said on our show. I said from day one, I was never rooting against the strike. Like I never called Sean Fain a phony or a fraud or an imposter or an infiltrator. I just thought it was strange that you had a union vote 97-3 to ratify a strike, the assumption meaning a strike is a strike, and then the abrupt change in strategy at the end, which coincided with a bump in the stock price, which usually signals the workers are about to take it in the ass.
Fixes in, yeah.
I thought, what's going on here? This doesn't seem right. But I never said that they were better off not striking than doing this. I never said they're better off just taking the deal they have on the table now and they shouldn't go on strike. Obviously, better this strategy than no strategy. Who knows if they could have got a better deal if they walked out all at once. We'll never know that. But the rank and file seem happy from what we're reading with these terms, and they got it done in 6 weeks, and only a third of them ever had to go out on strike. So it seems like good news for the auto workers here. Of course, the big question going forward is the transition to electronic vehicles, because a lot of those questions remain unanswered, and the ability to strike moving forward, if they get screwed in that transition, that was, I think, long-term will end up being the most significant part of this, even more than the wage increases, because that's existential for the entire industry.
All right. So what we do know is the stock of all of these automakers have completely tanked. So the deal is real, folks. That's how you know.
Right.
Their stocks are buried and really unable to recover, at least thus far. Also, Ford, it was kind of obliquely mentioned in that article. They did their earnings report on Thursday, and Wall Street was not impressed. Although their profitability did increase year over year, I believe there was they came in under estimates for revenue and earnings per share. And they are also laying off on EVs. They had they were really ramping up to challenge Tesla on its dominance, opening battery plants. I believe they already built one. They're delaying the other, and they are scaling back their investment because purchases of EVs right now have slowed, partly because of the price. You know, we got crazy interest rates right now. Who wants to take out a car loan? So yeah, it seems like, and this is not just Ford, across the board, the automakers are going to kind of lay back. They're feeling they got a little too aggressive with the EVs. So in terms of the labor implications, it looks like that's going to be delayed for a little bit anyway.
Well, yeah, I mean, that is certainly something that we'll have to keep an eye on, and that's like one of the reasons why I think having that contingency where, hey, we can strike if we don't get as just a transition as we feel we need was a very important part of it. And honestly, I'm a little surprised that they got that. I guess that was a real sticking point. I guess they just wouldn't take it without that, because you would think that if the automakers were going to give up something, it would be that. Because, look, wage increases cost them money, right? They don't like to lose money, but they can make money back, right?
Right.
This is a little bit more in the realm of long-term uncertainty, right? And that's something that scares the shareholders more than a temporary loss in money that they can make up for next quarter or next year, or next couple of years, right? The transition to EVs is something that nobody really knows quite what that looks like yet.
Exactly.
And part of what is a concern for not only people who work in the industry, but for people who drive cars as the price of gas goes up and down is there's a real question of is this going to be a race to the bottom? In which case, workers will ultimately get really screwed, right? Like if there just happens to be this competition, okay, who can make this stuff for the cheapest? Because at that point, the non-unionized houses have an upper hand. Tesla's workforce is non-unionized. Their pay rates, when you factor in benefits and everything, is about $45 an hour. There was a report that said pay rates, when you factor in benefits and the value that's added from the pension and things like that, the real wage here is about $80 an hour now that they got this deal inked, when you take into consideration the value of the health packages and everything. Well, so that's a big win, but that's something that, like I said, if it becomes this race to see, okay, who can make the most EVs for the cheapest, if it becomes imperative, that's something that the workers are going to have to navigate. And having that strike provision in there could prove to be really important, a few years down the road.
Tesla's getting killed right now also because their sales are coming in under expectations. So there is this mass move by consumers to back off on what had just been a long march of increasing EV sales. For the first time in many years, it looks like consumers are going away from EVs again, because of the cost. Now, this should be an example to other unions and other workers. Look, in the end, if the workers get together and stop going to the Amazon warehouse, they're going to have to give in. That's how strikes work. In the end, how do they afford it? Well, this has always been what we've said about this. I mean, it's just common sense. They have juiced their stock prices and juiced executive compensation for decades, at the expense of the workers. That's a big part of how we wound up with this very third world version of the United States we live in today, where increasingly you don't have a middle class, you have a very rich class, and everybody else is living paycheck to paycheck. Well, if you want to reverse the last several decades, you're going to have to go and look at what your great-grandparents did. You're going to have to take on these companies and make them less profitable for their shareholders and their executives. Doesn't mean they can't function, they can't do business. If that were the case, they wouldn't have taken this contract, right?
Right.
It means the stock price is not going to be as high as it was, and that's indeed the case. And eventually, maybe they'll get around to cutting executive compensation. It's not the end of the fucking world. A stock price that can only be supported by exploitative wages is a stock price that shouldn't be. Bring it back to what it should be worth with a well-paid workforce.
Exactly. Folks, this brings us to our patron scroll break here. So you can support this show by going to patreon.com/do dissidents. That helps us out a tremendous amount. Patrons get their name up in lights here on the scroll. They also get access to 2 patron supporter exclusive streams per month, as well as call-in access to our weekly post-show Q&As, which we do exclusively over on Rumble. So patreon.com/do dissidents. You can also go to dodissidents.substack.com and join as a paid member over there. You get the same perks. You can also sign up for free at Substack to join our newsletter. That really helps you stay informed if there is, for example, a change in schedule, as there was today. We sent out the Substack early in the afternoon. Just a heads up, we're on at 2:30 today, not the usual 8 p.m. So it's really important to join that Substack. This way you stay on top of things. If we do have to reschedule a show, you will be the first to know on that Substack. And you can also go to dodissidents.locals.com and join our locals. If you join as a paid member on the locals, you get the same perks as you get on Substack and Patreon. You can also join as a free member on locals. Works kind of similarly to the Substack, functions as a sort of social newsletter. We have 245 in the Rumble chat right now. If you're over on Rumble, you should see the locals prompt right under the screen, since Rumble and locals are linked. So please click that and join our locals. If you can join as a paid member, it really helps us out. If you join as a free member, it helps us out as well. It gives us a way to stay in touch with you. So join that locals, even if you have to join for free. Like I said, if you can pitch in, that really helps. We try to make the perks as worthwhile as we possibly can. But thank you all very much, obviously, for your continued support. We'll take some super chats here. Eric Cousseau. Yes, I agree with that one very strongly. Ruled by an insane religious death cult. Sure seems that way, my friend. Abiding, thanks for the 99 cents. Thanks for being here in the daytime. Appreciate that. Pete Sweets. Mearsheimer is pretty prophetic with the Ukraine war. Yeah, didn't Greenwald interview him again recently? I know he interviewed him like about a month or a month and a half or 2 months ago, but didn't he interview him again very recently? I think Greenwald has Roger Waters on tonight. That's going to be a great interview.
Does he?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's this evening. So, yeah, be sure to watch that, 7 p.m. Eastern. That'll be fantastic. But, yeah, you're right. Mearsheimer is very good. Mike. Thanks for the $20. Love catching you guys live. Great analysis and calls for action. Well, thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Mike.
Appreciate that very much, and thank you for the donation. We will do one more for now, and then we'll take the rest after the next segment. SB, thanks for the $10. I got to ask a first speech question. Do people who protect genocidal states like Israel, ADL, Shapiro, AIPAC deserve to be sent to jail for life? Palestinian children are dead because of these POS. In terms of them expressing their opinion, obviously no.
No.
Obviously no. I couldn't say that.
You do it to them, they can do it to you. As frankly, look, it's complicated because I am very happy to see so many college students speaking out for Palestine. It is definitely leavening the schadenfreude I might feel at the fact that the cancel culture that I promise you 95% of them were supportive of yesterday is turning on them. Hopefully, in the end, this makes them rethink the idea of interrogating everybody who made a bad tweet in high school.
Yeah, and I would just add to that. Not only I don't think they should be in jail, I don't think they should be censored. I don't think they should be deplatformed or penalized. And that brings something to my attention. I mean, obviously, this whole thing has brought this to front of mind. But now that Israel has admitted to bombing a refugee camp, why are they allowed to support Israel on social media, but people are being canceled for supporting Palestine on social media? Like, why? Like, I'm sorry. Like, I have to be a little careful how I phrase this, but like, you're supporting a government that bombed a refugee camp. That's a war crime. That is now a criminal organization right now, according to international law. And so there's no penalty for that. Now, just to be clear, I don't think there should be. I think they should be allowed to say what they want and have access to the platforms, and we'll compete against them in a battle of ideas, and we'll win. We are winning. I don't think they should be silenced.
Winning. Yeah, we're winning in spite of the efforts at censorship. And I've never seen anything quite like what we're seeing right now. And we'll get into it with some of our other stories. But the fact that the establishment lost control of what they thought was their creature, which is the students, particularly students at elite colleges, so quickly, because this didn't happen with Ukraine, right? They told these kids to go support Ukraine, and they did. They did. You heard nary a peep about it from that quarter. Right. They didn't see this coming. And the desperate, furious attempt to define support for Palestine as anti-Semitic, that's a desperate elite class. I mean, because it doesn't track. You just had the Jewish Voice for Peace shut down Grand Central Terminal with thousands of people, but it's all they got. It's all they got, because they can't just come out and say we want to ban speech, right? So they're using that as a pretext.
Exactly, and we have a full segment on that, which we'll do in a few minutes, but we have this segment that we have to do first here. So obviously, folks, yesterday, that would be October 31st, for those who are watching the clipped version of this, October 31st, Israel struck the Jabalia refugee camp in northern Gaza. Today, November 1st, it broke early this morning. They hit it again this morning, despite the outrage that it sparked from the most unlikely of places, including CNN's Wolf Blitzer, which we'll get to in a moment. But first, I want to go to the New York Times here. A deadly airstrike and Gazans at the breaking point. Israel said it killed a Hamas leader at a refugee camp, but many other people were wounded and killed, Hamas said. Oh, Hamas said that. Hamas said that. Really? They're the only source you have on that? The assault came as fuel, food, and water shortages pushed civilians to the brink. Where were those? Where did those fuel, food, and water shortages come from? Oh yeah, Israel. The imposed food, fuel, and water shortages have pushed them to a brink.
I love the passive language.
No, this article is just despicable. That's why I'm putting this up. We're only going to read this first card here. An airstrike that Israel said was targeting Hamas militants caused widespread damage in a densely populated neighborhood of Gaza on Tuesday. Hamas and hospital officials said numerous people were killed and wounded as humanitarian organizations warned that the territory's civilian population was at a breaking point. The strike left the largest of 8 refugee camps in chaos, and its aftermath, distraught residents could be seen milling about the newly cratered terrain, which was strewn with shards of concrete. Notice they don't put it as straightforwardly as Israel bombed the refugee camp, right? Look at that word salad that they serve up. A photograph published by Reuters showed a Red Crescent ambulance on a street and more than 30 white sheets wrapped around what appeared to be bodies lying on the ground. Hamas, the armed group that controls Gaza, and local doctors and hundreds of people had been wounded or killed at the Jabalia refugee camp. Independent verification of the claim was not possible, but Israel described the strike as a wide-scale attack. So once again, a very roundabout way of saying what eventually all these media outlets had to say, which was a deadly Israel airstrike hits Gaza's largest refugee camp. So that is the CNN headline. That's the CNN headline. Let's go to CNN TV, where Wolf Blitzer, of all people, a former AIPAC employee, a former reporter for the Jerusalem Post, finally, I guess, found it in him to ask some difficult questions to an IDF spokesman. Let's play this.
But even if that Hamas commander was there amidst all those Palestinian refugees who are in that Jabalia refugee camp, Israel still went ahead and dropped a bomb there, attempting to kill this Hamas commander, knowing that a lot of innocent civilians, men, women, and children, presumably would be killed. Is that what I'm hearing?
This is like you got emotion out of a hologram.
Yeah, exactly.
Wolf Blitzer
Barely,
is morally offended. This
Yeah.
is the guy who went on the air and talked about how we can't pull back defense spending because of manufacturing jobs.
Yep.
This guy is outraged, or as outraged as he's ever going to get on the air.
As he can possibly be, right, exactly. All right, let's hear his answer.
That's not what you're hearing, Wolf. We're focused on this commander, again, who you'll get more data who this man was. Killed many, many Israelis. We're doing everything we can. It's a very complicated battle space. There could be infrastructure there. There could be tunnels there. We're still looking into it, and we'll give you more data as the hour moves ahead.
Oh, we're still looking into it, and we'll give you more data as the hour moves ahead in terms of what infrastructure we took out, what tunnels we took out. You may want to gather that data before you bomb it and kill 400 innocent people, right? Yeah, we'll get back to you on the point of the strike while you're counting the hundreds of corpses from people who were stuck there. And yes, they are stuck there. This excuse, well, we told them to evacuate. He gets to that. I won't jump the gun on that. Let's let this play a little more.
But you know that there are a lot of refugees, a lot of innocent civilians, men, women, and children in that refugee camp as well, right?
This is the tragedy of war, Wolf. I mean, as you know, we've been saying for days, move south. Civilians that are not involved with Hamas, please move south.
We've been saying for days, move south. Civilians that are not involved with Hamas.
We tried so hard.
Move south.
We tried so hard. We dropped leaflets and everything.
They're at a refugee camp. The reason they're at a refugee camp is because they have nowhere else to go, and they have no means of getting anywhere. Move south. We told the people at the refugee camp, hey, charge up the Tesla and drive south.
No fuel, no food, no water.
No fuel, no water, no electricity, no means to do anything. They wouldn't be in a refugee camp if they were people who had the means to just pack up and leave in a day's notice, as you told them to. And the question I have to ask, I'm sorry, if you warned civilians that you were going to attack the area because Hamas was hiding there, how did you warn civilians without also warning Hamas? This doesn't even make sense. The whole human shield argument makes no sense. If you're warning people, hey, Hamas is here, so leave because we're about to bomb it, aren't you also alerting Hamas to the fact that you're about to bomb it? Aren't you also giving them the opportunity to leave? So what, are you interested in taking out Hamas, or you're interested in destroying tunnels? If this is about infrastructure, what that really means is this is about, what's the word? Land, which is, of course, what it's all about.
Well, in the end, what this is all about, and it's very different from the narrative that we got in the West, in America, and the West generally, is that Israel desperately wants peace and has always wanted peace. And, these people are just, you can't have peace with them. Even the two fanatical former IDF women that I caught at that protest. And this is another line that I've heard since I was a child from Zionists. There is no hand there to reach for peace. We want peace. There's no partner for us to negotiate with. And this is what is so terrible for Israel about this. People are delving into details of this story that they never did. And it turns out, yes, the PLO evolved into the Palestinian Authority, and they did have a partner for peace. And what did they do? They empowered Hamas.
Right.
Because they did not want a two-state solution. I can tell you because I am old enough to remember. So when Bill Clinton got Yasser Arafat, and I believe that was Rabin at the time. I could be wrong about that. It was Rabin, right? When he got them together, and this is part of not to excuse my former shit livery, but just to explain it, this is part of why we loved Bill Clinton so much, right? God, is there nothing he can't do? We got a boom economy, and he's actually going to bring peace to the Middle East. Because understand, when I was growing up, Yasser Arafat was Hamas. Right? Like the narrative around Yasser Arafat was he was Hamas.
No, he was not perceived as a moderate. Exactly.
No. And the idea, we're going to make peace. We're going to have this two-state solution. Now, when that fell apart and the Intifada started, and I think that was the second Intifada, the narrative that we got in the West from outlets like Time, actually, and Newsweek, was that they couldn't govern properly, and so they started stirring shit up to distract from their incompetence. They didn't tell you that Israel did not want them to become a state. They did not want that peace process to actually come to fruition, and so they sabotaged it, and the people there became frustrated and tried to rise up. And they empowered Hamas to disempower any moderate voices. They didn't explain any of that to you. And now all of this is coming out. I mean, honestly, I didn't know a lot of what I know now a month ago. And I think that's true of a lot of people.
All right, let's let this keep going.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get a little bit more information. You knew there were civilians there. You knew there were refugees, all sorts of refugees, but you decided to still drop a bomb on that refugee camp attempting to kill the Hamas commander. By the way, was he killed?
I can't confirm yet. There'll be more updated.
Oh.
Yes, we know that he was killed.
Oh, can't confirm. Okay, we know he was killed, right?
About the civilians there, we're doing everything we can to minimize. I'll say it again. Sadly, they are hiding themselves within civilian population. And again, we are doing this stage by stage, and we're going to go after every one of these terrorists who was involved in that heinous attack on the 7th of October. Wolf.
Lieutenant Colonel, I'm having trouble hearing you, but let me move on.
Yeah, that seems like an excuse. Lieutenant Colonel, I'm having trouble. I'm feeling human emotion for the first time in 57 years, and I don't really know how to process that. So I'm going to have to pretend like
I'm getting
an
erection for the first time in 54.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, exactly. I can't quite hear you. So we're just going to have to let that slide. He pressed him about as much as you'll ever see Wolf Blitzer press him. And look, he was not alone. We all watched that viral interview of Bassem Youssef on Piers Morgan. Piers Morgan, here he is on Twitter yesterday. Israel deliberately bombing Gaza's largest refugee camp, even if a Hamas commander was there, is outrageous and indefensible. So earlier in the show, for those who are watching the clip version on YouTube, you can catch this on our live stream. Earlier in the show, we talked about how the truth about the Ukraine war took about 1 year and 10 months to finally start to come out now in mainstream circles because of how unbelievably horrific this is. You're starting to see the truth come out in mainstream circles right now. This may have been a turning point of sorts, although Israel, despite all of this, hit the same camp today again.
Well, because they're used to having a blank check.
They're used to having a blank check, exactly. And, you know, I did something that I have not done in a very long time yesterday on my personal Facebook page. I just wrote a little post because I don't use Facebook really anymore. It's basically iCloud storage for family photos now. It's what my Facebook page is. But, you know, I'm Jewish, and I've had throughout my life, you know, people assume that I was pro-Israel because I was Jewish. When the topic came up, they would start kind of walking on eggshells around me a little bit, and they would say, you know, I know you're Jewish, and I would have to say, no, don't feel the need to walk on eggshells around me for that reason. So I figured, you know, given that this happened yesterday, I would just post, you know, hey, you know, I don't really do politics on my personal page here anymore, but because I'm Jewish, I kind of feel responsibility to let you all know that I oppose what's happening now, and that Netanyahu is the Hitler of our time, which I stand by 100%. I was very strong in my words, and The positive response to that came from people who I've known for a very long time of all political stripes. It wasn't just the leftists who I got to know from doing this show. Some of them obviously liked that post, but I had Christian conservatives that I knew from the George W. Bush reelection, who I used to fight with. They liked that post. I had mainstream liberals like that post. I had apolitical people who I knew to basically be, baseball fans that I would drink with and watch the game at the bar with. They liked that post. Because at a certain point, you can't hide the truth from common sense people. The average person has enough common sense and enough of a conscience to look at a picture like this and say, this is not self-defense. Very plainly. What you're looking at here, is not self-defense. And there is no way that the media can continue to convince a majority of people that this photo represents an act of self-defense by a noble and just government.
Yeah, I had a Zionist ask me, if not anti-Semitism, what it was that was driving these protests. And, they really give away the game when very often they'll compare it to other countries that have committed atrocities against Native Americans and Aborigines and so on. And what's the difference? Exactly. You're trying to do a 19th century genocide in a 21st century world. That's the difference. It's not 1850 anymore. And I was looking at Amy Goodman. She interviewed a leader of the student protest movements about the moves to shut down protest on campus as anti-Semitic. And if you look at the comments, it's a very common refrain from Zionists who don't seem to realize the implications of making that comparison. Like, basically, they're lamenting that you can't do what you did in 1850 anymore. Well, so these countries, what? They just did it earlier, so they get away with it? Yes!
Yes.
Yes,
of course.
Yes, because we like to think we've morally evolved.
Right.
Now,
That's called progress.
That's called progress, right? I mean, we don't crucify people anymore either.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Right? Do you walk around saying, oh, so what? I crucified my neighbor, but if I had done it 2,000 years ago, it would have been perfectly acceptable.
Yeah, right.
That's bullshit, man.
Right.
But I mean, that is how in a bubble they are, that they don't seem to realize that they're conceding the entire point of the protests, that this is a throwback to horrific colonial adventures that wiped out or decimated native populations. You are conceding that when you're making that comparison and saying, well, why can't we get away with it too?
Yeah, of course.
And the defense that it's uniquely anti-Semitic, that's all they've got. That's all they've got. You got thousands of Jews shutting down Grand Central, and it's still anti-Semitic. Somebody sent me an article in the Jerusalem Post today where they make the argument, well, there have always been a minority of women who were against women's rights and African Americans who were against African American rights. That doesn't mean that those movements were wrong. They're seriously trying to make that comparison, and they hang it on a very misleading statistic, showing that, and I don't even know how much I trust their source, but they're saying 83% of people, if you ask them, does Israel have a right to exist, will say yes. That's not really the pertinent question here, if you want to talk about how people feel about what Israel is doing. The pertinent question is, how do you feel about bombing women and children that you've kept in an open-air prison for 15 years? Does Israel have a right to do that?
To do that, right.
Because I promise you, 83% of Jews do not support that action.
No.
That is why you're seeing these protests. If 83% of Jews were in favor of it, you couldn't get these kinds of numbers of Jews. You couldn't get thousands of Jews shutting down Grand Central Terminal.
Right.
You'd get 200 people there at best if those numbers held to these actions. I'm sure a lot of Jewish Voice to Peace, maybe even most, believe in Israel's fundamental right to exist, but not in this way, not with these kinds of actions.
Right. No country has the unconditional right to conduct itself however it wants. That's what international law is there for. That's why you have international law. Quick break here, Russell. 1, 2, 3, 4. Thanks for getting us over 666 in the YouTube chat, 269 in the Rumble chat. We are at a midday time slot here, so please hit that like button and help get us some more people in here because we don't have our usual crowd with us today. So please hit that like button, hit that follow button over on Rumble, subscribe button over on YouTube. That segment ran a little long, but for good reason, so we're going to split this into 2 clips, so I will just give a brief recap. Obviously, Israel struck the Jabalia refugee camp in northern Gaza yesterday, and the excuse that they gave was that they warned civilians to leave, as if they had the means to leave. If they had the means to leave, of course, they would not be in a refugee camp in the first place. But I made the point that in warning civilians to leave, are you not also warning Hamas to leave? You know, I don't really understand the logic. If you're going to warn people you're about to bomb somewhere, aren't you also warning the terrorists that you want to catch off guard and kill? That leads people to believe...
Well, don't forget, they're the world's most moral army.
Yeah, especially considering that they're the world's most moral army. It seems like a very weird choice for the world's most moral army to make. So weird that it leads many people to believe that this is about something else, something other than eliminating Hamas, that this is all about taking the remaining land from the Palestinian people that is currently Gaza and swallowing it and absorbing it into the Israeli state, as they have been doing for decades. We've all seen the graphics of the evolving map, right, where Israel has expanded their land over the past several decades. And turns out, this is according to the Associated Press now, very mainstream outlet, The Standard, really, that everybody goes off of, the local and state papers print based on this. An Israeli ministry in a concept paper proposes transferring Gaza civilians to Egypt's Sinai. An Israeli government ministry has drafted a wartime proposal to transfer the Gaza Strip's 2.3 million people, 2.3, so all of them, not some of them, not the ones who are displaced, no, all of them. They have drafted a wartime proposal to transfer the entire population of Gaza to Egypt's Sinai Peninsula, drawing a condemnation from the Palestinians and worsening tensions with Cairo. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office played down the report compiled by the intelligence ministry as a hypothetical exercise. Oh, sure. Sure.
It was like college bullshit session.
Listen, I'm Jewish, okay? My brother's a Jewish lawyer. We got better lawyers than this. You can't come up with a better statement than that? A hypothetical exercise. This is a time of war. You have time to be coming up with hypothetical wartime plans, really, in this moment of extreme urgency where you're fighting for your life, as you claim? You have time to draft up hypothetical exercises? A concept paper. But its conclusions deep into long-standing...
I just want to point out, while we're paused for a second, this is not the first leak. There was one that came from a think tank that was run by Netanyahu's former director of their version of the FBI that proposed exactly the same thing. So this looks to me a lot like after 9/11, Cheney and company had their proposals. They had the Patriot Act in like 2 days because that shit was their wish list that had been sitting at the bottom of a drawer since the Nixon administration.
Right, they just needed a pretext for it.
That's it. They had that stuff all ready to go. That's what this is. That's why they already have this written.
Yeah, but its conclusions deepened long-standing Egyptian fears that Israel wants to make Gaza into Egypt's problem and revived for Palestinians memories of their greatest trauma, the uprooting of hundreds of thousands of people who fled or were forced from their homes during the fighting surrounding Israel's creating in 1948. That's, of course, the Nakba. The document is dated October 13th, 6 days after Hamas militants killed more than 1,400 people in southern Israel and took over 240 hostage in an attack that provoked a devastating Israeli war in Gaza. It was first published by Sikha Mekomet, I'm sorry if I mispronounced that, a local news site. In its report, the Intelligence Ministry, a junior ministry that conducts research but does not set policy, offered three alternatives, quote, to effect a significant change in the civilian reality in the Gaza Strip in light of the Hamas crimes that led to the Sword of Iron War. That's what they're calling it now, I guess. The document's authors deem this alternative to be the most desirable for Israel's security. The document, there we go. The document proposes moving Gaza's civilian population to tent cities in northern Sinai, then building permanent cities and an undefined humanitarian corridor. A security zone would be established inside Israel to block the displaced Palestinians from entering. The report did not say what will become of Gaza once its population is cleared out. Well, what do you think will become of Gaza once its population is cleared out? They would just absorb it into Israel. Of course. Egypt's foreign ministry did not immediately respond to a request for comment, but Egypt has made clear throughout this latest war that it does not want to take in a new wave of Palestinian refugees. So, look, once again, I wasn't going into this as blind as I was Russia-Ukraine because I've mentioned I'm a millennial. I'm a generation behind Russell. So growing up, the Middle East wars were the wars that I had to pay most attention to. Russell is a Cold War kid, so he was a little more steeped in that history than I was. But I still called this just exactly the same as I called the Russia-Ukraine war. It was very obvious to me as soon as this happened on October 7th that Israel was going to use this as the pretext to do what it has wanted to do since 1948, which is take over the entire region. And if that means killing all of the Palestinians, they are willing to do that. Of course, nice people that they are, noble army that they are, they'd rather just relocate them and put them in tent cities and make them Egypt's problem. But if they have to kill them all, they're more than happy to, obviously. So this has been the goal the whole time. It was very obvious from day one. Again, I knew more about this than Russia-Ukraine, far from an expert. You don't have to be an expert. You need a couple of brain cells. You need an ounce of common sense, and you need to be able to tell yourself the truth. You need to be emotionally mature enough to tell yourself the truth and allow yourself to absorb it. This was obviously the game plan all along. And by all along, I don't mean since October 7th. I mean since 1948, 1967. Yes. This has been the plan. This is the plan. They are fast-tracking it now. And the only thing that can stop them is mass consciousness that demands that power be wielded to stop them. And we are, thankfully, knock on wood here, starting to see some of that, which we'll get to later in the show.
Yeah, and the more you think about it, the more you look at the implications, the more you look at the nature of the Israeli state, you can see why they sabotaged efforts to have the two-state solution that they will claim that they want. Right. Because if these Palestinians got a state, well, now they have standing in the international community, right? Now they have ambassadors around the world. Now they have trade relationships. Now they have a real army. Now they might have a supplier of arms. Now they have power. This is like the landlord that doesn't want to let you buy.
Right.
Right? They never wanted them to have that kind of independence and dignity and ability to challenge their agenda. So all of their claim about wanting a two-state solution has been revealed to be total bullshit. They don't want a two-state solution. They sabotaged it when they had the opportunity to have one. And, we keep hearing about how Israel is a democracy. Okay, well, Netanyahu is their leader, right? So they bear some responsibility for the actions for those who try to separate the Israeli population. And I understand there are people in Israel who don't approve of Netanyahu, but we're talking democracy. Enough did to have kept him in power all these years. Enough of that population supports it to keep him in power. So there is some responsibility there, just like as an American, we bear some responsibility for George Bush, right? I mean, not personally. I didn't vote for him, but as a nation.
We bear responsibility for Joe Biden. We bear responsibility for what's going now. That's why we are in the streets now.
Right. Good point.
Because this is happening in our name and on our dime, whether we like it or not.
All right. And it is for Israelis of goodwill to do everything they can to shut down this government, which, they say it's a democracy, but we see, I saw an article, their chief of police threatening Palestinians who say anything for Palestinian rights to send them to Gaza, ones who live inside of Israel proper, most of whom are descended from people who managed to stay there during the Nakba and after. It's just this atrocity of a historical proportion being played out in a world with social media and smartphones. And in the end, you just can't do Wounded Knee in broad daylight like this in the year 2023. You just can't. And Israel is so arrogant and so used to just doing whatever it wants and worrying about the spin later. Let them condemn us in the press.
Right.
I don't think they realize what they're courting. I have from the beginning, it has been my opinion that the Arab countries are going to attack. That they're just not going to be able to let this
launched
stand.
rockets. Yeah, Yemen has already started.
Yeah. They are courting an attack from all of their neighbors and assuming that the United States will be able to protect them. Now, look, I don't know all the ins and outs of armaments and so on. Seems to me if all of these Arab countries launch their rockets at Israel can't survive that because it's a very small piece of land.
It is. And obviously the big question there, one of many big questions that poses, is what happens to the Gaza Strip and the West Bank in that scenario, because they're all right on top of each other there. So that's another thing. All right, let's take some super chats and then we'll move on. We got a few more segments, plenty more show left, so don't go nowhere. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that follow button. Baron Saturday, thanks for the $5. You guys are the most nuanced and accurate news guys around right now. Thank you. Never change. Well, appreciate that. Appreciate the compliment. Thank you very much.
Much to the frustration of a long line of therapists, I can promise you that I don't change.
Don't change, right? Yeah. People have tried to make Russell change. Many have tried. Many have failed.
Many ladies from my past will tell you don't have to worry about that.
Yeah. From Rumble, as a Rumble rant, happy hump day, boys. You heard Bolivia cut ties with you-know-who. Cheers. Yeah, cheers indeed. We're hoping that we can do a big segment on that on Friday morning because we're hoping that more follow suit in the coming hours. But yes, I did see that. That's great. That's what's got to happen. Another Rumble rant here. Alan McLeod from Scotland pointed out that this IDF spokesperson is from Scotland, then called him a settler colonizer in a tweet. I'll have to look at that. But thank you for that. Appreciate it. Appalachian Sufi, thank you for the $4.99. Have you guys been getting my messages about possibly coming on the show? My name is Jordan from the Appalachian Sufi podcast. You're talking about coming on our show or coming on your show? I'll have to look into that. But no, I don't think I got any of those. I will take a look. Do you want to come on here? You want us to come on there? We'll talk. Yeah, dudissidents@gmail.com. I don't see why I wouldn't be receiving them.
Yeah, I haven't seen that.
Yeah, I haven't seen that. You can DM me on Twitter @dudissidents. Maybe that'll work better. But yeah, definitely reach out. I apologize if I missed it, but I didn't see any. Kazetski Bassane, thanks for the $4.99. Appreciate that. Cranky Hand gave us a laugh for €5. That's nice.
Thank you.
Glad we can make you laugh, and thank you for the donation. Anti-COVID regime, anti-Ukraine war, pro-Palestine, the few, the proud, fellas. Thank you, Dan. Well, yeah, look, I mean, that just goes to show you, I mean, those are three good examples of how draconian the establishment was in enforcing the narrative at the very beginning, and then they were forced to stand down as more information came out. With this Israel war, it's happening very, very quickly because the truth of it is just so obvious, right? With Ukraine, you had to know about the history of Eastern Europe, which not a lot of us were versed in. With COVID, it's who knows about the germs, it's microbiochemistry. Who the hell knows about that? It takes a while, right? With this is in your face, 24/7, undeniable.
Well, they didn't realize how they had prepared the ground for this kind of backlash. They were fine with them pulling down Confederate statues. They wanted it to stop at that.
Right.
They wanted people to litigate a civil war that ended 150 years ago. They never thought about what might happen if similar atrocities were committed in real time by a client state of the U.S., how they would react. I'm working on an essay about this. It is with many references to Mary Shelley and her creature.
Beautiful. That sounds good. Eric Rousseau, thanks for the $5. I feel like our leaders are the nuke worshippers on Planet of the Apes.
Did you get that?
Well, I remember the movie. Sure.
Yeah, but that's he's referencing the sequel.
Oh,
he's talking about Beneath Planet of the Apes.
Oh, okay.
Where they went into like the buried Manhattan.
Interesting. Okay, so then I guess I didn't get it. I mean, I know Planet of the Apes, an apocalyptic film, but apparently that had more layers than I realized. So thanks, Russell. Sean Lancaster, thanks for that donation. That's very kind. Bros, I can't stop watching the show. This is the only good show on YouTube. Well, thank you for the compliment. We're not the only good show. Watch Convo Couch, watch Jimmy Dore Show, watch RBN, watch Hardlands Media. There are quite a few others. We are in some good company.
There are some unboxing channels that are pretty good.
Yeah. You ever watch the Toy Story 3 unboxing set? That's pretty killer. That's pretty epic. My kids love that.
There's a Taylor Swift fan channel we really like.
Yeah, that's not bad. That's not bad either.
Yeah. We're Swifties. You would never think it.
Yeah, try to expand your horizons, expand your taste a little bit. But thank you for the compliment. Okay, let's move on here. Okay, so speaking of stifling of dissent and stifling of speech, we did a segment on this last week. But the White House is now getting involved. Biden administration unveils new actions to combat anti-Semitism on college campuses. The Biden administration is unveiling new actions on Monday to combat anti-Semitism on campuses after an alarming uptick in incidents since the Israel-Hamas war started in early October. The Departments of Justice and Homeland Security are partnering with campus law enforcement. Let me repeat that. The Departments of Justice and Homeland Security are partnering with campus law enforcement. You know, the douchebags used to drive around the college campus at night. Now they have two new colleagues, the DOJ and the DHS, to track hate-related threats and provide federal sources to schools, according to the plan, which was shared exclusively with NBC News. Some of what they will be assessing include specific and credible threats that are flagged online. There was an arrest made at Cornell University. A 21-year-old kid was apparently threatening people, and so they charged him, which is all well and good. You should not be allowed to threaten people, obviously. However, do we really believe this is going to stop there? We'll read on. Dozens of cybersecurity and protective security experts at DHS have been detailed to engage with schools as they navigate incredibly tense environments, a White House official said. So why don't we go to some video here rather than read that boring article, because this really says it all, right? Obviously, there are laws against threatening people, especially if you're threatening them because of any protected group status. No one is going to argue that people should not be allowed to threaten people because of who they are. Right. However, this clip here gives you a pretty good example of what they consider to be threatened comments or threatening comments or bigoted comments. Here's White House spokesperson Karine Jean-Pierre comparing the student protests for Palestine to, I don't even want to give this away. I want to see if anybody in the audience who hasn't seen this, guess what she's going to invoke. Hint, it's not January 6th, believe it or not. It's not January 6th. You got to go a little further back in time than January 6th, but let's take a watch.
Israel protesters in this country are... Doesn't Biden think the anti-Israel protesters in this country are extremists?
What I can say is what we've been very clear about this. When it comes to anti-Semitism, there's no place. We have to make sure that we speak against it very loud and be very clear about that. Remember, what the president decided to, when the president decided to run for president, is what he saw in Charlottesville in 2017.
Oh,
he saw neo.
Charlottesville in 2017. That's the comparison she draws. Not January 6th, Charlottesville. Let's play this again.
When the president decided to run for president, is what he saw in Charlottesville in 2017, when he saw neo-Nazis marching down the streets of Charlottesville with vile anti-Semitic just hatred. And he was very clear then, and he's very clear now. He's taken actions against this over the past 2 years, and he's continued to be clear. There is no place for this type of vile and despite this kind of rhetoric.
What an unbelievable joke this administration is. I mean, what an incredible joke. You're going to compare Free Palestine protests to a Unite the Right white supremacist rally in Charlottesville.
A protest in favor of brown, mostly Muslim people. This is why I'm saying they're desperate and they're afraid. Because there's such... For propaganda to really be effective, it has to be somewhat plausible. And there is just such a mismatch between this rhetoric of these protests being rooted in anti-Semitism and the reality. I mean, they keep making these claims that there's this mass waves of anti-Semitism at these protests. I mean, I would think if they had a lot of evidence of that, they'd be spreading it around, right? You'd be seeing a lot of videos of that. And as you pointed out on the last show, people at these kinds of protests are usually very conscious not to present themselves that way because they understand that it hurts the cause.
Exactly.
I mean, when you're talking about worldwide hundreds of thousands of people, can you find a guy? Sure. But that certainly doesn't characterize the movement. And having been to one of these protests, I saw racism among the counter-protesters, which I documented and showed on the show. I'm an honest broker. If I had seen it on the other side of the street, it would have been in that footage. I didn't see it. It didn't exist.
Yeah, no. And this is the same White House that just said that. The same White House that just said that the pro-Palestine, free Palestine, anti-genocide protests on college campuses populated with students who are only following the advice of their professors who told them to decolonize their mind, right, and stand up against white supremacy. They are analogous to the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville. That same White House is now going to be coordinating with your campus cops to police online speech.
Which is really terrifying. Yeah. So I've mentioned a few times we haven't seen this kind of disconnect between the establishment and students since really the 60s and 70s. So I haven't done one of these in a while. I'm going to make a book recommendation. I have recommended this before. Brian Burrows' Days of Rage. This is the best source I know of covering the various radical groups during that period, not only groups like the Weather Underground, but the Black Panthers, the Symbionese Liberation Army, splinter groups off the Black Panthers. And something most people don't know, and I am not advocating for this in any way, but it's interesting how this, I feel this is suppressed. I feel this aspect of that period is suppressed. You had 1970 and 1971, there were over 2,000 domestic bombings in America each year. Over 2,000. Today, if they find a pressure cooker in a dumpster, everybody loses their mind. This was going on constantly during this period, and it was not the right, it was the left. It was what they certainly would have called the left at the time. And also, something that is more supportable, 1/3 of college campuses were shut down on any given day by protests.
Protests, right.
A third. So this is the first time since this period. And hey, you think that can't happen? Look at what college campuses were like just a few years earlier, right? You're looking at the Eisenhower years, a very, very short time before that. People are going to school with crew cuts and jackets and ties, right? Within a few years, first you have protests, and then you start to have these groups like the Weather Underground actually doing bombings, which again, we do not support or advocate anything like that. But the campus protests, I think we may be moving back into that kind of era, because it is the first time since then that there is such a gulf between not just students, not just your technical college 2-year associate degree students, the students they care about, the elite students, the Columbia students, the Harvard students, the Cornell students. In other words, the ruling class, the people they're grooming to replace the establishment. They haven't had those people say boo to them in 40 years, at least 50, more like 50. That's what's scaring them so much. That's why they're cracking down on this so quickly, because we have a gerontocracy. A lot of these people are old enough to remember that shit. And they're like, oh no, not again. We got to nip this in the bud right now before it gets out of control. But the nature of censorship and repression is, the harder you try to suppress it, the stronger it gets. And I suspect that's what's going to happen here.
Well, speaking of speech on college campuses, the Uni Party seems to be in alignment on censoring pro-Palestine dissent on college campuses. First, we go to a likely source of hypocrisy on this issue, Ron DeSantis, governor of Florida, who recently shut down pro-Palestinian protests on state campuses. Here he is explaining that decision on Meet the Press.
Banning of pro-Palestinian. This week you called for the banning of pro-Palestinian groups from Florida state colleges. Your Republican challenger, Vivek Ramaswamy, says that violates the First Amendment rights of these students. He writes, quote, "It's a shameful political ploy. It's unconstitutional. It's utter hypocrisy for someone who railed against left-wing cancel culture." What is your response to Mr. Ramaswamy?
This is not cancel culture. This group, they themselves said in the aftermath of the Hamas attack that they don't just stand in solidarity, that they are part of this Hamas movement. And so, yeah, you have a right to go out and demonstrate, but you can't provide material support to terrorism. They've linked themselves to Hamas. And so we absolutely decertified them. They should not get 1 red cent of taxpayer dollars. And we also have strong laws in Florida against fundraising for groups like Hamas, and we are enforcing those vigorously. It's not a First Amendment issue. That's a material support to terrorism issue.
Yeah, just to be clear, you're citing the Florida law that says one cannot give material aid or resources to a terrorist organization. Do you have any support that they're actually doing that?
Their own words are saying they're part of this organization, that they don't just...
That's a no.
Yeah.
That's a no.
Yeah.
That means you don't have evidence. Material support is a very specific thing. It means evidence of material support. There is hard evidence that could be produced to corroborate a claim like that if you had it. He doesn't have it. What he's saying is rhetoric that he doesn't like constitutes material support to the enemy. This is straight out of the Patriot Act playbook. No surprise this guy created human centipede chains at Guantanamo Bay that he would be saying this right now. This is, like I said, a very likely source of this from him.
Stand in solidarity.
Sorry, go ahead.
You can finish it. You can finish it. I'll just jump in at the end.
Okay.
Yeah.
That they don't just support what they did, but that this is their movement too. So once you hitch your wagon to a group like Hamas, that takes you out of the realm of normal activity, and that's something that we're going to take action against. So we believe...
Hitch your wagon, express solidarity. This is speech. This is protected speech. You don't have to like that speech, but that is not material support. That is a completely different thing. All right, that's all we need on that.
Yeah, DeSantis is a little fascist punk. He's one of those people. He reminds you of the evil frat in Animal House. He would have been a member of that frat. He is, as we've said for a very long time, much more dangerous than Donald Trump. And it says a lot about Democrats that I think a lot more of them would vote for him than would vote for Donald Trump. But he's a lawyer. So understand, he's not speaking out of ignorance. This guy is a little fascist. You want to tell, oh, Trump's a fascist. This guy's a fascist. This is a guy who actually, as a military lawyer, empowered torture
and force
at Guantanamo. and force feeding. This guy, he reminds me of the president in Escape from L.A. Like, you want to see a Christian theocratic kind of a governance, that is what you will get with Ron DeSantis, which is why I am still of the view that he will wind up with that nomination if Trump is prevented from getting it by the deep state. Because, yeah, man, he checks a lot of the boxes. In the end, the establishment Republicans will like him, and he has not been wrong in his political calculations on the positions he's taken on this wokeness. But this does show how shallow his defense of speech is. It was never about speech. It was always about culture war. It was always about empowering speech he likes and disempowering speech he doesn't like. It was never a civil libertarian issue from the guy who, according to accounts, was very amused by watching people shit themselves in Guantanamo.
Yeah,
this guy is not he's not a free speech warrior.
Yeah, and by the way, he admitted to empowering force feeding there. He's admitted that on camera, that he came down and made the case that no, it's not a violation of law to force feed.
But he never admitted to laughing while watching these people, which is what people claim.
Right.
That he was very amused by
but I'm saying even what he's admitted to is bad enough and proves what you're saying. All right. Now let's take a look across the aisle. Let's jump across the aisle and about 1,000 miles north, and let's see what friend of the show, Richie Torres, has to say about campus speech. This is a report from local New York TV.
Has seen a rise in bias against Jewish Americans since the... New York City has seen a rise in bias against Jewish Americans since the terrorist attack on Israel.
Yeah, local leaders condemning acts of anti-Semitism, especially on college campuses. Fox 5's Linda Schmidt joins us now from the newsroom with what Congressman Richie Torres has to say tonight. Linda.
Hi there, Steve and Natasha. He had a lot to say today. The Bronx congressman has been very outspoken, by the way, about the growing anti-Semitism in the U.S., especially on college campuses. So now he is calling on the federal government to step in and withhold federal dollars from colleges and universities.
Wow.
We are calling upon the Department of Education, the federal Department of Education, to hold our college campuses and universities accountable.
Accountable for...
All right, so there you have right-wing authoritarian fascist Ron DeSantis in Florida saying we're going to shut down student protests on state campuses. And now you have uber woke LGBTQ Latino New York liberal
IAZLB.
Yeah, right. The whole thing there. Member of the Progressive Caucus, Richie Torres, saying he wants to withhold funding from schools that allow these protests. So you see, I mean, according to the blue pill universe, you couldn't get more polar opposite than Richie Torres, Ron DeSantis. And yet they're in lockstep on this.
That is part of what is so disturbing about this particular cause, because at least, I mean, not from DeSantis, but at least there was some daylight on Ukraine between certain elements of the Republican Party and the establishment. There's just no relief for the Palestinians from Washington, just none. I mean, some of the squad members have been calling for a ceasefire, but you know, I mean, those guys are about as useful as an asshole right here for all the power they're going to exercise over Mama Bear. But yeah, I mean, if there's anything the political establishment has in common, it's wanting to wage war on civil liberties. That unites them. They all want to shut down people's right to protest and challenge their views. And I just want to point out, Richie Torres, to try to deflect attention from how much money he takes from AIPAC, has been showing an article that featured him supporting Israel before he was a congressman. So, you know, most people don't just wake up one day and decide they want to be in Congress. You lay the groundwork for that long before you actually make a run. So showing that in 2015 you were a rabid Zionist already does not demonstrate that you were not angling to get in on that sweet AIPAC money later.
Yeah, I saw that he was trying to explain himself. But again, the fact that he is under pressure to explain himself in that way is proof that we're winning. We are winning the information war. We are winning the PR battle, because it is a given that Democrats, especially New York Democrats, take AIPAC money, most of them, right?
Sure.
And so they never have to explain any of that. The fact that he has to explain that now is a win. And speaking of the squad and AOC, I think I can tell this story. I don't think he'd be upset with me. In fact, he'd probably think it's funny. Our friend Jose Vega, you were on this text chain the other day. He works at a coffee shop in the Bronx, and guess who?
A very cool little coffee shop, by the way.
That's right.
There.
You were at the
I was
coffee
there.
shop.
Yeah, I was there the night we had our encounter with
your date
Ms.
with
Maddow.
Rachel.
Our date with Rachel, yes.
Well, he was working his shift there, and who comes into the coffee shop but one Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez? And apparently she did recognize him, and he did tell her before she left, thank you for supporting a ceasefire. We agree on that. And she says, yes, we do. So apparently they were nice to each other. But AOC just slammed AIPAC in a recent tweet this morning. So maybe we'll cover
he didn't
that on
even hock
Friday.
a loogie in our coffee.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah. No, he's a professional. But maybe we'll cover that on Friday. But yeah, I mean, this just goes to show you, and this is, we made this point. I heard Jimmy make this point on his live show last night. This is the tragedy of the Cornel West campaign, is that he's the only one who is really correct on both Israel and Ukraine. He's the only one with any significant polling. I mean, I'm sure the PSL party is too, but they don't have any polling. He has actual polling support. And so isn't it a shame that he can't get his shit together? That's why the stakes are so high. And that's why we were invested in it for as long as we were, at least hoping against hope that he could kind of pull this together and make this happen. Because what Russell said is true. There is no hope in the electoral system for justice on this issue. It falls to us. It really does. And we're going to get, that's our next segment. So yeah, let's take some super chats and then let's get to that. Thanks for being here, everybody. Please hit that like button so we can get some more people in here. We got a couple more segments to do here. Mersheimer.
I like this in here. She brings the tuckus. That's about it.
Oh, brings the tuckus. Funny. Mersheimer, he seems to be a gatekeeper of sorts. In the interview with Glenn, he said the U.S. doesn't want to attack Iran. Yes, they do. That's what Iraq war was all about. Gaining access to that airspace in order to fly over from Israel to bomb Iran. They say it openly. It was in an 2009 policy paper. Wesley Clark found it in the Pentagon and told Amy Goodman about it. Don't buy it. Thank you, Dave. Appreciate that. Thank you, Ardeen W., for becoming a monthly supporter over on Rumble. Appreciate that.
Oh, thank you.
That is very kind of you. Guys, hit that like button over there on Rumble. Hit that follow button if you're not following us over on Rumble. We have been growing the Rumble subs lately, which is always good to see. So thank you guys all for being there. Go
all
ahead.
right, I'm gonna weigh in on a couple things in the chat. I think somebody misunderstood about Planet of the Apes. Okay, I imitate that scene when I bring tourists to the Statue of Liberty. You maniacs! You blew it up! Damn you all to hell! So I am well aware of how that movie ends. There was a sequel where it's the people, the humans who survived the nuclear war that elevated the apes are living like in the old subway tunnels under Manhattan. So that's what that was a reference to. And also there's a little debate going on here. Sabbath or Zeppelin. I mean, Zeppelin was the better band.
Of course.
Yeah. I mean, I love me some Sabbath, but like Stranded on a Desert Island, whose discography would you bring?
Oh, yeah.
You'd bring Zeppelin.
Yeah, no question about that. I'm glad you answered that correctly because we'd have had to throw down.
We would have had to have blows.
Yeah, we had to trade blows. We don't have time to trade blows. Pete Sweet, thanks for $5. Gaza is not an open-air prison, but an open-air CC. I know what you mean, and I know what you said there down below. Propagandize believe Palestinians deserve imprisonment. YouTube censoring some words. Yeah, like concentration camp. Could be. It would not surprise me. But yeah, no, people's that's a good point. Look, people's understanding of this evolves, right? You start out thinking baseline, it's an apartheid state. Then you realize, no, it's worse than an apartheid state. It's an open air prison. Then you learn, no, it's worse than an open air prison. It's a concentration camp. Now it's worse than a concentration camp. Now it's a death camp. What's next? It's empty. That's the end game.
The more you learn, the worse this story gets. This story is just it's very hard to take. You know, I mean, it's just children blown apart. I mean, it's just
it's
just horrific. It's just horrific. I mean, I've made this point before, not to take away from the kind of domestic issues that we've been focused on. People shouldn't die for lack of health care. People should have a decent wage, but that is very different from covering genocide. I mean,
of course.
It's just we are witnessing one of the most barbaric and horrific acts of atrocity against a people in the history, certainly in the modern history of humankind.
Yep. And what makes it extra traumatizing is the fact that really now, I mean, once again, from where we are, there's just no way to stop it. There's no way to stop it. At this point, I mean, we're going to get into this in the next segment here. If we can, if we can shorten it, that could save 500 people, right? I mean, if we had gotten a ceasefire before that refugee camp strike, that's 400, 500 people who would still be alive now, who aren't. And so that has to be the goal. But big picture, yeah, no, it's an absolute horror, an absolute horror.
I just keep thinking of Nietzsche. Be careful in fighting monsters, lest you become one.
Yeah, indeed. Sean Lancaster, thank you for the $5. Wife, I saw your text to your mistress saying you were leaving me. Husband, that was just a hypothetical. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, good one. All right, we'll take another one, and then we'll get to everybody before we go. Don't worry. Adolf used the genocide of the First Nations of America as justification to exterminate the people of Eastern Europe. Yep, steal their Lebensraum. Yep. Thank you for that. We'll take one from Pat Donahue since he's up over in Ireland. Wolf will fall back in line after they bulldoze Gaza and push the residents into the desert. Yeah, right. I mean, look, that was hardly a heroic act of journalism on his part, but for a guy as emotionless and as unquestioning in service of the military-industrial complex as he has been throughout his life, that was about all you can hope for.
I remember years ago, very briefly, Michael Moore had a TV series, and he used to ask like absurd poll questions.
Yep.
And so one of them he asked people if they thought David Hasselhoff has sold his soul to the devil for his career, which got a majority. I would love to ask people that question about Wolf Blitzer, because there's no other explanation than this guy sacrificed a goat and pledged himself to Lucifer.
No particular talent. I mean, he really looks like a South Park character. Round head, no neck, wide eyes. He really looks like a South Park news character.
He has absolutely no talent. Like, so how does that happen in this notoriously competitive industry?
Yeah.
How does this guy
no charisma,
occupy that perch for decades?
No, for decades. Yep. Exactly. It's quite something. So, folks, people are making their opposition to the Israel war known. Code Pink, who we have had our things to say about for sure in the past, they showed up and protested Antony Blinken. Here's Medea Benjamin standing up and interrupting a hearing with the Secretary of State.
Shrinking back. God,
why is this doing this to me today? Here we go.
Not shrinking back. Not in the face of Russia's aggression against Ukraine. Not in the face of an intensifying strategic competition in the Indo-Pacific and around the world.
If the witness will suspend, and I ask that everyone again respect this hearing, we will suspend until the room is cleared.
66% of Americans favor a ceasefire. Not one senator wants a ceasefire. 80% of Democrats favor a ceasefire right now. Not one Democratic senator is standing up saying ceasefire. You have a few in the House, none in the Senate, not Bernie Sanders in the Senate. A humanitarian pause for aid. This humanitarian aid is really becoming a red herring, as if what the people of Gaza need is like a care package, floated into a war zone. No, they need is to stop being bombed. Right, yeah, exactly. They don't need stuff. They don't need first aid kits. They need to stop being bombed. They need to stop being annihilated. Anyway, I just wanted to, in case anybody missed what she said, because it's a chaotic scene, but here we go.
The world is calling for a ceasefire. The American people don't want to support this brutal war. Stop the war. Stop the ceasefire now. Stop funding this brutal massacre that Israel is doing on the people of Gaza. Ceasefire now. Ceasefire now. Ceasefire now.
Thank you, Senator.
And there the activists raise their hands with the blood on their hands. Look, this is what it's going to take, obviously. That's a nonviolent protest, and we obviously want all of these things to remain nonviolent. They must remain nonviolent. But it's going to be piece by piece by piece. This has to become more and more common. There's just no other way to bring about a ceasefire and get something resembling justice. I mean, there's no reconciliation here. How could there ever be? But you at least need to stop the damage as soon as possible, and this is the only way to do it. That was in D.C. Should we play Kynan, or you want to chime in on that for a second?
Well, I mean, I'm going to have the same thing to say about Kynan. These are the things we have to do. We have got to disrupt the narrative. We have got to disrupt the narrative. Somebody asked me today if I thought there was a point to what we did with Rachel Maddow. And I said, well, yeah, because they're never going to be asked these questions through any, legitimate media. And, what we got from that? The libs who read Newsweek saw Rachel Maddow, quote, warmonger, and it forced them to have to take that in.
Exactly.
That's what you're doing. You can't expect to do everything all at once, and you can't take everything on yourself as if you, with an action, have to turn the tide. That's very narcissistic. That's very egocentric. You have to be willing to be one small part of a much larger movement. But for that to be effective, within the bounds of the law, me and Jose said that in our follow-up video, within the bounds of the law, we need hundreds. We need thousands of people doing this. We need these politicians, when they show their faces, to get challenged, to get confronted. And as somebody who's done it, I understand it takes balls and it's not for everybody. But I know it's for some of you. Some of you can do that. And within the bounds of the law, again, I think we're going to talk to Jose. We've had a request for this, for him to actually come on and talk about what the laws are regarding this. I think that would be a good segment.
Oh, it would be, yeah.
Find out what your legal rights are. And within those bounds, yeah, Hillary Clinton should not be able to go places without being confronted. Put all these people on notice, and not just them. Little freaking fascist punk DeSantis. I'm not just talking Democrats. That guy. What about freedom of speech? I thought you supported freedom of speech.
Right.
Force those confrontations with that little goon. All of them. All of them. But that is what we have to do now. We have got to challenge the narrative.
Yeah, and speaking of challenging the narrative, friend of Jose's and friend of ours, Kynan Thistlethwaite, had a few words for Adam Kinzinger, former Congressman Adam Kinzinger, loser Adam Kinzinger, proud supporter of both the Ukraine war and the Israel war, whose new book, Renegade, pro-war renegade, Adam Kinzinger had a book event, and here's Kynan getting up and giving him a piece of his mind.
I think the only thing we need, Congressman,
I think the only thing we need to discuss here today is a need for a ceasefire in Gaza. Okay? November marks the killing of Yitzhak Rabin, who sought peace between Israel and Palestine. He said that if you wish for peace, it has to be through economic progress. He said that you don't get security with a tank or a helicopter or with weapons. You get it with hope. You get it with education. You get it with access to health care. That's what he promised the Palestinians.
Listen for the good German. Listen. Somebody asked the security guy if he's okay. Listen for it.
What was agreed to between Rabin and Arafat.
They really roughed him up.
We need a ceasefire now. We need a ceasefire. Are you okay?
Are you okay?
Yeah. Good German. That's what you call a good German.
He's grabbing him by the throat. He's grabbing him by the throat. Whoa.
You're a warmonger. You're dangerous.
No, they didn't do it the way you did. You filmed and then you waited. He got right back up.
Cooperation is the
One take, baby.
solution to
Continuous shot. Little Orson Welles, Citizen Kane there.
final solution to the Palestinian question.
Hitchcock's The Rope.
Yeah, exactly. Rope.
Final solution to the Palestinian question. We cannot have a final solution to the Palestinian question.
And he held the phone.
Yeah, well done. Well done. That's what it is. That's what it's about. And when we say within the bounds of the law, it's not just because obviously we don't want anybody getting in trouble and we don't want anybody getting hurt ever, obviously. Just, we're nonviolent. But you have to keep the moral high ground because that's how this will work. The reason why we're winning the information war here and we're winning the PR battle here is because they're not able to make any of these criticisms against us stick. People understand when they look at a crater in the middle of a refugee camp, they know that is not self-defense. And they know that the people speaking out against that are not anti-Semitic and they're not violent, right? That's how you win these battles. And we are winning these battles. Will we win it in time? That's an open question. Although I have to say this, I don't eat my words often on this show because I choose them carefully, more carefully than sometimes it looks like I do. But I will have to say I am surprised. I am surprised at how far the public has come towards the right side of this issue. When this happened on October 7th, our first broadcast, if you listen to our first clip that we put out since this happened, I said this is over. I said it's over for Gaza. They're just going to wipe them out and nobody can do anything to stop them. I honestly, and I'm happy to say, that I don't feel that hopeless anymore. And the reason I don't feel as hopeless anymore is because of the genuine and large-scale, broad-based outpouring of sentiment from people expressing their opposition to this. And I'm proud of our peers in this space for holding the line on this, too. Letting go of RFK as soon as they, stroked his dick a few months back. They let him go as soon as they, as quickly as they did that. That's important.
Except for one.
Who?
Who was featured on Jimmy Dore last night.
Who was featured? Oh, well, yeah. But he's not a peer in the space. He's a fan of the show.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's true.
I'm talking about a peer.
None of our peers. None of our peers have held on to RFK.
Yeah, right. None of the peers in the space. Right.
Somebody, either IM'd me or they tagged me in a tweet that Kim Iverson. The way they framed it, Kim Iverson got the Topanga Canyon hippie basically to admit that she's going to endorse Biden.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's how they framed it. So I'd have to see it to know if that's really how it went down. But on this score, I just want to quote the late great John Lennon. I pulled this up so I get it right. When it gets down to having to use violence, then you are playing the system's game.
Right.
The establishment will irritate you, pull your beard, flick your face to make you fight. Because once they've got you violent, then they know how to handle you. The only thing they don't know how to handle is nonviolence and humor.
Exactly. Yep.
And we have both in spades around here.
Yes, we do. Indeed. No shortage of those. We have one more segment, folks, to do before we wrap here, but let's take some super chats before we do that. SB, thanks for the $5. Anti-Likud Israelis are violently hateful as well. Secular Zionists are just as bloodthirsty. The Gray Zone stream today goes into this. Were they on already? I know the Gray Zone usually goes on around the time we started, right? So I don't know if you're multi-screening or if you know what they're going to be covering, but... there's a bunch of stuff that Blumenthal's put out from his travels to Israel that really shows the underbelly of that society.
From what I understand, most Israelis are not actually religious.
Right. Yeah, that's my understanding too. Libertarian Socialist over on Rumble. Thank you for those $2. I just saw that here, so I'm just going to read that if that's okay with you. But thank you. They're going to throw Joe Biden under the bus and then tell us to line up behind Gavin Newsom, who's just as awful on Israel. No, this is not going to work. This is not going to work, and that's what our last segment is about. So I won't jump the gun on that. But thank you for that comment because they're out of cards. They are out of cards. I don't think there's any undoing what they've done here. And given that they were playing a lousy hand going into 2024, they could not afford to burn another core constituency, and that's exactly what they've done. And we're going to demonstrate that in no uncertain terms in just a couple of minutes. DC, thanks for the $5. I find it odd that Bill Ayers and Bernadine Dorm from Weather Underground and Black Panthers like Angela Davis went on to befriend Barack Obama. MK Ultra, yeah, who knows, man? Who knows what that's about?
Look, man, I mean, they were all rich kids.
Yeah,
they
right.
were all
exactly.
pretty, I mean, like with most of those hippies, they wound up reverting to form.
Yeah.
Although I'll tell you something, a lot of people don't realize Chesa Bodine was actually the son of a very prominent member of the Weather Underground, Kathy Bodine, who was then raised by other members of the Weather Underground out in San Francisco.
Yep, indeed. This is really interesting. I did not know about this. Assuming this is true, which I believe it is, because progressive Michiganders, reputable, old fan of the show, thank you. Did you see Rashida Tlaib's video pledging not to vote for Joe Biden unless he supports a ceasefire? It was tweeted out by Means TV and is on their YouTube channel.
Okay, I'm not clear that's exactly what she said because all I'm getting is a clip of her saying,
"We will not forget this" or whatever.
We will not forget this, exactly. Which is
there something
not
more recent?
Exactly the same as explicitly
No, it's nowhere near the same.
That.
It's nowhere near the
right.
same. Explicitly
right.
saying that is huge. Saying we
I
will not
haven't
forget
seen her
this, that's another
say
empty
that.
threat. So yeah,
Right.
but I'll check it out because if she did say that, then yeah, that's obviously a block for Friday. But I'll have to look at it. DC, thanks for the $2. Means TV is a COINTEL Pro psyop. All right, well, I will look at it anyway because video is video. But thank you. Will Musk the cuck not give Starlink to aid group? Yeah, he was talking about how he was going to turn on Starlink for Gaza, and then he kind of backed off and said he's going to run it by the authorities to make sure that it doesn't get into the wrong hands. So, I mean, who knows? Who knows with him? But thank you, long story short. Russ, call him by his name, Shabbos Ron. Thank you, long story short. Oops,
He's,
what did I just do?
Ron DeSantis, Shabbos
the hell did I
Goy.
just do? Is everybody okay? Are we still on? I almost
Yeah,
fucked
we're on.
something up. Okay, I almost fucked something
We're
up.
on.
See, it's hard.
What is
This StreamYard platform is, like you said, all these controls are right near each other. You never know if you're going to hit the wrong button. All right, we're good? Everybody good?
Yeah, who'd I kick off?
You banned Tusker once.
I
by
banned
accident.
Tusker once, but temporarily. So
And
she
then you
just
banned
came back. It
Courtney.
was like I gave her a timeout once.
Right. Then you banned
Yeah.
Courtney, who came back and then left of her own volition anyway, I guess.
Yeah, I guess so.
I guess so.
All
right.
We're too Hamas adjacent.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. It's a joke, YouTube.
It's a joke. It's a joke.
Here we go. This is the last.
I said hummus adjacent.
Yeah.
Or hummus adjacent.
I think the code for Hamas, if they start censoring words, should be ham-ass, right?
Yeah.
That's a good code. Ham-ass. Just say it, but just pronounce it. Put the accents differently.
You got that there ham ass
That there
goes in
ham
all
ass
kinds
group.
of trouble.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Ellen is over on Rumble saying, you banned Tusker once by accident. We banned her.
Yeah,
And then
yeah,
we
yeah.
let her back in.
But it was just a timeout.
It was just a timeout, just temporary.
Yeah.
Exactly. Okay, we have one more segment before we must call it a day. So last call for Super Chats and Rumble Rants. We will read all of them, but we are through the ones we have. So last call, if anybody wants to get a question or comment in, we will read them before we leave. So we did a segment in our last show about Biden's approval rating dropping by a very significant 11 points among Democratic voters. So his approval rating now down to 75% within his own party. However, this makes that look like nothing. This is the most amazing drop in support over this short a period of time that I and many people have ever seen. This is Time Magazine. Biden's Gaza stance spurs stunning drop in Arab American support. Palestinian and Arab Americans have expressed outrage over Biden's response to Israel's bombardment of Gaza, which has killed more than 8,000 people, more than a quarter of them children. It's actually more than a third. It's up to over 3,000, over 3,000. The first national poll of Arab Americans since the war in Gaza began shows how deep that sense of betrayal goes, with only 17% of Arab American voters saying they will vote for Biden in 2024, a staggering drop from 59% in 2020. That is a 42% drop, not in people who approve of Joe Biden, right? Because saying, do you approve of Joe Biden is different from saying, will you vote for Joe Biden? There are a lot of people who don't approve of Biden, but who vote lesser evil. This is people saying they will not vote for Joe Biden. So only 17% of Arab Americans say they will vote for Joe Biden in 2024, down from 59% last time. Quote, this is the most dramatic shift over the shortest period of time that I've ever seen. James Zogby, the founder and president of the Arab American Institute, which released the poll on Tuesday, tells Time Magazine. The damage isn't limited to Biden. Just 23% of Arab Americans identify with the Democratic Party, marking the first time a majority did not claim to prefer the Democrats since the Institute began tracking party identification in 1996. So they've never been under 50 with Arabs, and now they're at 23. Those identifying as independents rose to 31%, the highest it's ever been. The poll results are likely to increase concerns among Democrats among Biden's standing with Arab Americans heading into 2024, particularly in Michigan, where roughly 277,000 Arab Americans call home, and Biden won in 2020 by 155,000 votes. But the smaller Arab American populations in Pennsylvania and Georgia were also larger than Biden's margins of victory there. All three states are ones Biden flipped after Trump won them in 2016. This is later in the article. Even though 2024 appears likely to present a rematch between Biden and Trump, Arab Americans insist Biden cannot take their support for granted. None of those who spoke with Time say that their lack of confidence in Biden means that they'll be inclined to vote for Trump, but some remain conflicted about whether the situation would be any worse under the former president either. Look, we're not silly. We know what Trump has done to our communities, says Amarzar, the president of the Dearborn-based New Generation for Palestine. But when it comes to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, he continues, quote, the policies are basically the same, except when Trump does it, you get some pushback from the Democratic Party.
And the media.
And the media. And the media. Exactly. The difference between Biden and Trump on this is the same as the difference on the southern border. It's how do we emotionally process the horror of what's going on. On the border, Trump says, kick them out, deport them, fuck them, it's our country. Biden says, well, we love them, we respect them, but we have to kick them out, right? Same thing here. Under Biden, it's we really should send aid to these people to shame what's happening to them, but we have to support Israel. And under Trump, it's we will make no apologies for supporting Israel. It's all about emotional processing. There's no actual material difference between Biden and Trump, Democrats and Republicans, and that is a stunning and seismic drop from 59 to 17, from over 50% party affiliation with Democrats to 23. That's unheard of. You never see trends like that in
No,
politics ever. I've been reading political polls religiously for 15 years. My love of politics is born of my love for baseball. Baseball is a game of numbers, a million different stats that you balance and weigh against each other. Politics is the same way. I've read thousands of polls in my life. I have never seen, and neither has James Zogby, a very famous pollster, obviously. I have never seen anything approaching that kind of shift over such a short period of time.
Well, and this is where the problem with the fact that there are no Biden supporters, there are Biden tolerators, really comes into play. Because when you have no base, you have nobody who's excited about you. Nobody's ever been excited about you. As soon as you make a move that people don't like, there's nothing to stop your poll numbers from just completely imploding. There's nothing to hold you up because nobody has any feelings towards you to begin with, right? There's no, I don't like what he's doing here. People will make up stories in their head. You see the way they do it with Trump, right? I mean, in a lot of ways, the Q thing was just like that phenomena on steroids. You see, he's just playing along right now.
Right, but he's gonna
what he's really going to do is, I mean, it's that. Everybody does that with their political heroes. They make these excuses. But when nobody likes you to begin with, there's nobody trying to put the best possible face on your actions. Oh, his hands are tied by this. I'm sure he really wants to do this. You have to give him a little room and put pressure on, hold his feet to the fire and he'll see sense, right? Nobody says that about Joe Biden because he has no base. This is a case where increasingly it looks like the Republican is just going to win because if you are a Republican, you have choices that you like. Right? There are people who, most of those Trump supporters, with some exceptions, suppose Trump has a heart attack tomorrow, right? They'll be happy with DeSantis. You know, any antagonism is only because he's running against Trump. It's not that they really have a problem with DeSantis. And a lot of them enthusiastically like him, if you look at the polling. Like, he's not negative with the Republicans. He's not negative with that party. Whereas Biden, I mean, nobody likes him. So you're looking at a case where, you know, the Republicans just win by default, which, I mean, in a lot of respects, I feel is what happened in 2016. I never felt Trump won the election. I always felt Hillary lost it.
Well, the other thing that people have to keep in mind here is that going into this election, the Democrats had everything working against them to begin with. People feel terrible about their economic situation. You have people living in their cars just as a lifestyle choice. People who could probably technically afford an apartment, but it's so fucking expensive. People are like, fuck it, I'll live in my car. You have parking lots are repurposing themselves to accommodate people who live in cars, right? So when things are this dystopian on the domestic front and the tide has so turned against the incumbent party where every single poll you see, right track, wrong track, satisfaction with the economy, satisfaction in leadership, competency for the job. Obviously, most Americans feel that Biden is just inherently not up to the job. With all of these factors working against you, you as Joe Biden cannot afford another blow to your coalition, and that's what this Israel war has been. It's been another blow to the coalition. You can't, on top of everything working against you already, have the Arabs jump ship as dramatically as they have, and they will. I was at that Free Palestine rally in Troy the other night. Nobody at that crowd was going to vote for Joe Biden. They were chanting, fuck Joe Biden. It sounded like a Trump rally for a second. Everyone was chanting, fuck Joe Biden. He blew, I mean,
not even let's go, Brandon.
Not even let's go. No, the uncensored version. Yeah, no, I mean, that's it. Like, this is it for him. This is it for him. This is the thing you could not afford to have happen. You cannot afford for another core Democratic voting, not voting bloc, but another constituency that leans Democrat. You cannot afford to have that coalition just shattered in the way that this has. And you know, look, what the guy, I forget his name here, I'll bring it back up again. What's his name? Amir Czar. What he said is true. He says, look, we're under no illusions that Trump is going to be any better.
Right.
But we might at least have a more organized opposition. and it won't be anything worse. And even if you don't want to look at it that pragmatically by saying, well, if Trump gets in, the Democrats will be more organized, because we know what that looks like. It's bullshit. That's how you get women's marches and all this nonsense, right? At a certain point, you have to say, look, we are not.
What would a pussy hat for Palestine rally look like?
Right, exactly. That might be good. If anybody wants to jump the gun on that and get printing those, those might be big sellers in a couple of years. At a certain point, though, you just have to say, listen, this is the red line. Like, we will not, no matter what the consequences are, we will not vote for a candidate or a party that signs off on genocide. We will not. We cannot. Because what these guys here are starting to notice is what we've been saying since 2016, is if you establish no standards and you establish that there is no red line, you will get trampled every time. You'll get trampled every time. And so you just have to say, no matter what the consequences are, don't call us an accelerationist. Don't ask what our strategy is. It's as simple as principle. We will not support a candidate or a party that signs off on the mass slaughter of a civilian population, as Joe Biden has, as Donald Trump no doubt will, as RFK no doubt will, should he pull a miracle. We are not doing that. You have to define your movements on certain terms. This is as basic as it gets. Absolutely no way in hell will we support any candidate or party that signs off on this. And it's got to be as simple as that for you.
And this is why a lot of dedicated activists wind up walking away from electoral politics and just getting involved in grassroots movements.
Right.
Because they don't want to be morally compromised. They don't want to be complicit in what these people are going to do. Now, I don't know. Honestly, I don't know where I stand on that in general for myself. I don't question it for anybody else. I know there's nobody running right now that I feel we need to support.
No, of course not. Of course not. I mean, if Cornell had a real campaign, I would support Cornell.
Right. We were going to.
But he doesn't. Yeah, exactly. All right. We'll take a few more super chats before we wrap. Thank you guys for being here today. Please hit that like button before you leave. Hit that subscribe button if you're here on YouTube. Hit that follow button over on Rumble. Everybody follow us on Rumble. Even if you're watching on YouTube now, rumble.com/do dissidents. Please do that.
In case the hammer comes down.
In case the hammer comes down. And please join our Substack too. I know a lot of you guys have, so thank you guys for heeding my advice on that. But a situation like today is a perfect reason why you should be on our Substack, because every once in a while, it's not often, we've been being pretty good about keeping to the scheduled times, but every once in a while we do actually have to change the times up. If you're on our Substack, which is free to join, it's just an email newsletter, you will get alerted, hey, we're not on at 8 tonight, we're on at 2, so make sure you tune in. It's good to just, keep in touch, and you get all those alerts when we announce them on the Substack, so please join that. Z Kaim, guys, please reply to Megyn Kelly.
What did that bitch say about us now?
Yeah, what is she talking about? I don't know. Is she texting Russell again?
She's always come on. Listen.
You mean react to Megyn Kelly? Did she say something that we should play and roast her over? I don't know. I have to watch. She's not in my feed. I don't get much Megyn Kelly material fed to me through the algorithm.
I mean, I told her, you want me back, no politics.
Exactly.
She kept talking shit, man. Knock it off.
Yeah.
It's enough. Move on.
And no veggie burgers.
Blitzer is available.
I want red meat.
Yeah.
Up the Reds, thanks to the $5. I've been following the situation in Gaza since 2019, and I honestly thought it would get this bad. I mean, they even lost Wolf Blitzer. Yep.
They lost George Takei.
Yeah. Yep.
I mean, when you lose Sulu on something that Joe Biden is in favor of, you've lost the game. You've lost the propaganda war.
Yeah. Yeah, indeed. Oh, and by the way, for those of you over on Rumble, I see Indy is there in the Rumble chat. I just saw you there because you posted a link to your Substack. Follow Indy's Substack too, because they got censored by YouTube very unfairly, and so they need the support. So join their Substack. I'm sure you guys have a paid tier or a free tier, but join there so you can stay in touch with them and keep in touch with their work, because they got the hammer dropped on them by YouTube, and so it's important to support our indie media friends wherever they are. So that's in the Rumble chat right now. If you're in the Rumble chat, click that link and sign up. Wear skill. Thank you for the $5. I prefer my fascists in Crocs instead of jackboots. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, well, yeah, that's always. I mean, I can't argue with that. I mean, you know, if you had to choose, if you had to.
Well,
choose.
those boots, a lot of times they have the steel toe. It makes it easier for them to kick the shit out of you.
Exactly.
People here are shocked with Sula. Yeah, he got one look at the footage in Gaza. He said, "Oh my."
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Couldn't take it.
Pete Sweet, thanks for the $10. Lived in Dearborn Heights, Michigan for my first 50 years in the middle of Talib's district. Oh, wow. This is no surprise to me as the Mideast community is very well educated, savvy about U.S. politics. Yeah, no, it's no surprise to me either. Although I have to say...
Well, they have to be.
The extent to which they dropped off is staggering. I mean, it's no surprise that he lost support there, but I will amend. I was surprised that it was that drastic, 42%. Although when you think about it, maybe I shouldn't have been surprised, because if this issue can't break you, what can? I mean, this is as bad as it gets right here. It doesn't get any worse than this. And Pete Sweet, thanks for the other $5 here. Mideast community in Dearborn, regardless of religion or country, stand in solidarity with one another. Proud people. Yep. Yes.
Yeah, you get the sense with Omar and Talib, this is just the last inch of themselves they can't sell. They just can't. They can't. You know. I mean,
Rashida Tlaib can't. I mean, she has family. She's spoken about visiting her family. I believe they're in the West Bank. I don't think they're in Gaza. I could be wrong about that. But she talks about it there. And, you know, there was a guy who was from Gaza who spoke at the rally that I was at. That clip is on Twitter now. That's 2 minutes of it. We have about 8 minutes of it. I'll show more of that on Friday. But, yeah, no, the stuff they go through is just insane. Just to get in and out is insane. He was talking about how when he would visit his family, he would go through Egypt, and apparently, and this is something, you know, you just don't learn this stuff unless you hear it from these people, because these are just these are just like day-to-day aspects of this that you don't hear about. He said Egypt charges people to get out. So if you want to exit, so if you go to visit family from Egypt, go into southern Gaza, you have to pay money to get back out, or else you can't afford to go to begin with, because then you can't leave. They charge people on the way out because that's how little respect. You know, they just figure they'll make money off of it. And so if you have a big family, there are times when you just can't afford to go because you wouldn't be able to afford to leave. Just things like that. And, you know, Rashida Tlaib talks about going through the checkpoints and having, you know, them pulled a gun on her husband at the time. I don't think she's married anymore, but yeah, I mean, just horrible. And so, you know, she feels that, like, she's a person. As a person, you feel that, and you don't forget that. And yeah, this seems to be a line that they can't cross for now, at least, hopefully.
Well, if you've seen Roger Waters' video, that's gone around a lot, where he talks about why he got involved in this issue, because he went to visit, and they told him, yeah, this is a Jewish road. And he was like, no, you're fucking with me. They were like, no, only Jews are allowed on this road. And he said, you know, he was driving around with the UN truck. And he said, and they looked at them like garbage, the way that they acted towards them. And he thought, well, if this is how they're treating us, how do they treat the Palestinians? And he saw for himself all these checkpoints and gates these people have to go through. It's fucking apartheid. What else do you call that? As much as Zionists are furiously trying to deny that label, because they have to. They have to. As soon as they concede that, the entire moral argument is lost.
Indeed. Indeed. All right, folks, that's our show. Thank you very much for being here today. We had a good crowd in here for this early time, 709 strong in YouTube, 306 on Rumble, so we broke 1,000 today despite the time change. So thank you guys very much for that. We appreciate you all. You can go support our show, support our project. The best way to do that is to become a patron. It is a new month. In November, we will have 2 patron-exclusive streams this month. You also get call-in access to the Q&As every Sunday night, and your name up in lights on the scroll here. Our new patrons will have their names added to the scroll for next show. Because this is a matinee, we didn't have Jake here to add you this time, so we apologize about that. We'll get you added on there next time. And thank you guys very much for all of your support. Wherever you are, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that follow button over on Rumble. If you're over on Rumble, join our locals. Even if you can't join as a paid member on locals, join for free. It's just another way to stay in touch with us. And, of course, dudissidents.substack.com. We need everybody on our newsletter, so please go there if you can. dudissidents.substack.com. We will see you all back here Friday morning, 9 a.m. Eastern. Until then, be safe and be well.
Courage.
Sorry, I fucked that up. I meant to hit the end, and I forgot our outro.
That was like when they leave the newscaster on at the end.
All right, one more time. Ready? Reset. Be safe. Be well.
Courage.
Beautiful. Thank you, folks.
Please clap.